Okay, my stream should be up. What's up, guys? My name is Rami, Frogbear, Ramirez, self-professed targeted individual. Now, the reason why I say that, this kind of comes up because I'm very aware of everything that occurs around me, especially, what was it? It's been now, I think it's almost been over a month since I've quit my usage of medical marijuana. Over a month and a half. I don't know. It's been a while since I quit, right? But I know that I'm making this video against my better judgment because of the narrative that it creates around the perception of myself. Now, there's no other way for me to explain this because the only it didn't really make much sense why I would profess this. There was one other time that this occurred, and it was when I was still making very fast news or QAnon news. I don't know. My BitChute channel is the one that has all of those videos. Since my BitChute channel has been immune to getting deleted off the internet, but there was a time, I want to say 2019, where there was this fatigue that would come over me, and it would make it very difficult for me to think. And around that time was around the time that I kept talking about this proposal that Gina Haspel kept putting up. Gina Haspel, I don't know if she's still the director of the CIA, but she was the one that took over after John Brennan. And it was basically a document that, or it wasn't a document, it was legislation that would change the status of classified information. Essentially, what they wanted to do was, regardless if it was already done, if these agents were no longer in service, you could no longer look into what they were doing. You couldn't look at what they did. You couldn't look at what operations they were a part of. They wanted a blanket clean slate. They wanted to redact all information. What the agents did, what the operation was. They wanted to keep redacting all of it, right? And so, with that in mind, that's kind of around the first time that I gave up on that channel. So I'm pretty sure it was QAnon News, because there was two portions of I had one YouTube channel that was QAnon News, which got quickly deleted, and and it's so funny because the video that they flagged for bullying and harassment was a video where I read. I think I still have it on my computer because it was a bit of a trophy, because it was the first time I ever talked about Jeffrey Epstein, and it was in 2018, well before his arrest, well before the name entered the lexicon, the zeitgeist. But right, that was one time. But there was, at that time, it was a lot of fatigue. I noticed that it became very difficult for me to focus on things. Now, this time around, the only thing that happened was, so what was it? I went to the gym, came back, got home, but there was this right, like, the only way I could explain it is if I play this video. Now, I want to bring up the fact that I think this is a podcast, yeah, by Yahoo News of all places, and I want to highlight the fact that they're focusing on it from the issue of Havana syndrome. Because, you know, we had a lot of politicians. We had people trying to facilitate a deal between Cuba and the United States back in the day. And by the way, the only reason why I feel, or it's not that I feel, it's that I know for a fact. Don't get me wrong. The newscaster who's actually reporting this story is focused on the fact that he's assuming that it's a foreign entity. He's assuming that it was the KGB, it was Cuba. But when you look at what the Cold War was, it was just an excuse. If anything, me talking about the Atomic Commission, if me talking about all of the weird black budget stuff that they were putting underneath the Atomic Commission, I always point to the fact that a report is very important, because there are very few people who get to read these reports. There are very few people who actually get to see the overall scheme of what's going on during these operations, or during these secret, what do you want to call it, experiments on the human populace. And this isn't, right, I'm not really suggesting, because right, I've already talked about the isotope files where they were literally giving radiation poisoning to people. They were spraying radioactive material over Indian reserves, over schools, over metropolitan areas. This is all released report stuff, which I always like tying it back into when all of this material was released was during the O.J. Simpson trial, which is kind of the same thing that happened with the Johnny Depp trial when they were focusing on Johnny Depp and not on the Maxwell case. Look at this, don't look at this. So I'm just going to play you a portion of this really quickly. Let me mute myself.
Those at attacks reported hearing the sounds of Cuban cicadas or crickets, and then actually recorded them. Here's one of the AP reporters from 2017.
The recording gives us the first tangible sense of what it was like for these American government workers in Havana who were hearing these unexplained sounds in their residences and later developed physical symptoms. The U.S. Embassy in Havana has...
That noise. So I've heard about Havana syndrome before, and I've also heard a variety of other people who have spoken on the issue. But that noise... At first, I thought it was just the crickets. At first, I was just like, all right, if it's just the cricket that's annoying me in my room, I'm going to go out here to the garage and take a nap, take a sleep here. Because it was like 3 a.m. in the morning and I'm dead tired. But it was just unnatural because, I'm focusing in very heavily on this noise and I couldn't really make a sense of it. But, again, here they're trying to discredit the fact that, well, how did they record the recording if this was entirely in someone's head? And they use this as a large scapegoat. Remember, this is a scapegoat. Mainly because there were a variety of instances during the Havana syndrome period, right? During the whole Cuba crisis thing. Should I just name the either way, I'm not going to name these people because, right? They were associates of Allen Dulles, and they were the ones, I think it was Allen Dulles who was heading the CIA at this time, and during the failure of the Bay of Pigs, and essentially Kennedy kind of forced them out of their position. But during this time, well, they're focusing in on the time period. I'm not really... where he has a lawyer kind of speak on this. Guess it restarted itself. Let me just refresh the page. Very interesting how Yahoo News actually has something called the Conspiracy Land podcast. Very good stuff. Okay, it won't even let me play it. Very weird. I'm not going to suggest anything there. It's probably just my shoddy internet. I do live in the hood, you know what I'm saying? But it's not that there's somebody... Like, I'm not suggesting that there's somebody outside or pointing a ray gun at me. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. That's highly inefficient. That's highly compromising. And it wouldn't make sense to do any of that because it just takes too much time. And right, who the fuck is going to hang out in a sketchy van outside in the hood? Nobody, because you'll regularly have cholos be like, yo, who the fuck are you? Are you some, like, right, right, it just exposes too much. And that's not how these intelligence agencies like to work. They like to do things very easily, kosherly, and without much repercussion. So here in this, it's at 15 minutes. 15 minutes, it's a lawyer who's talking about, and it's kind of funny because the reporter in this Yahoo, the reporter who's reading this for the podcast, is interviewing a lawyer that he regularly goes to file out Freedom of Information Acts. And he's even mentioned himself that, like, look, I'm privy to classified information. I know what's in the background of all this. And from what I know, it's very difficult to suggest that there isn't something that exists that could mimic these sort of symptoms. But he isn't saying it from the perspective of a foreign intelligence agency. He's saying this from the perspective of internal, as in saying that this technology isn't only, right, no nation is doing this. I would highly suggest that if anybody had this technology or, You know what I mean? It would be the CIA, in my opinion. And the reason why I would highly suggest that is because these are the same people that developed the heart attack gun, because they wanted a covert means of doing all of their operations, a covert means of not having anything be traceable back to them. I think another person that I can use is Govley. What was his name? Hold on. It's the guy who brought, Sidney Govley. I could put a picture up. Let me see if I can get that really up here real quick. Very interesting individual. He's the one that's accredited to essentially bringing LSD to the CIA. Yeah, it says it right here. Sidney Govley was an American chemist and spy master who headed the Central Intelligence Agency from 1950 to 1960. Assassinations attempts and mind control programs known as MK Ultra. Essentially, he was the head of this whole operation of MK Ultra. It was always important to know who's the head of the department, but when you kind of look at how it all broke down at the end of the day, he was just the fall guy. And he was essentially, their whole purpose was, or at least for him was, to see what sort of technology, what sort of techniques, what sort of things that he could develop that would further push the envelope in these experiments. Because in reality, Sidney was actually focused on just using LSD as a mind control thing. Do I have to click this? Very interesting how this doesn't want to play, because I was just playing it earlier to remember what time periods it was. But yeah, so went to the gym, came back, and I just kept hearing this incessant ringing, and I couldn't understand what was going on, and I just couldn't sleep that night, and I just left it at that. I really didn't think much of it. Even now, I still don't think much of it. Like, I could tell the difference between what a cricket does and what a cicada does, but I live in Los Angeles. Cicadas don't exist here. So it was very weird for me to be like, I need to close my window. This damn cicada's annoying. But when I go to reach the window, I thought to myself, I've never seen a cicada here in the hood, let alone Southern California. So it was very difficult for me to try to explain this thing that was coming on to me. Until I found this podcast where it explains it, and I was just like, oh, that's the exact noise that I heard. You gonna play it for me? Come on, don't be mean. Very interesting. I was just listening to this earlier. Either way, it'll probably play while I'm trying to do all this. But yeah, but it was very interesting how this podcast, or at least the reporting of it, is very focused on the essence of Havana syndrome. But the way I see it was, this was during the Cold War. If anybody wanted to keep perpetuating this notion of an enemy or a threat, there's only one person who actually benefits from all this, and that's the bankers. And the reason why I say that is because I don't think that the CIA acts in accordance to the benefit or the interest of the United States. Everything they've ever done only ever benefited the European financial infrastructure. And I always view these things from that perspective. So this is a journal entry for me to describe that I think I've upgraded in status. I'm no longer just a normal civilian. And I guess what really put me on the radar for these people, I would suggest, is the fact that I figured out, like, I was doing research on the Nazis. I was doing research on cybernetics, because I was more interested in how they created this elaborate system of, Project Mockingbird, controlling all the news networks, controlling the flow of information, controlling what is truth, controlling what is considered scientific truth more than anything. And the fact that nobody ever really connected the dots with all these things. And I think I probably made a mistake by naming Marlborough Vanderbilt, or Marlborough Churchill, who married into the Vanderbilt family. There is that to also focus in on. But it's very interesting because I also discovered, what was her name? She's an MK Ultra survivor who wrote a book called Sparky. And she essentially details out that the people that they tend to choose for some of these grooming programs are from their own families. They won't let anybody else from below them kind of join in these programs, because you have to control the environment and control the belief system of these people. Because if you don't, what you essentially find yourself, or at least what they found out, was when they let outsiders in, what occurs? They create a Kennedy. They create somebody who looks at the inside of these upper echelons, and they realize how dark and twisted they are, that they'll actually try to do something against them, which is why they killed the entire Kennedy family who attempted to do anything differently. And I think it's funny because there is one Kennedy out there who's still trying to fight a fight, but I don't know if he's trying to fight the right fight. But yeah, very interesting how I found myself in this situation. And I don't know what to do about it. At this point, it is what it is. Now, again, I'm not saying that there's somebody outside, because that's highly inefficient. That's highly stupid and highly compromising. That's not how these people work. These people like to make these narratives up, which is why I highly, that's why I brought it up in the beginning, that I'm making this video against my better judgment, because it spins a narrative. It spins this whole crazy idea and this whole crazy notion that I'm feeding into. And that's kind of what they want. They want to put these people into these positions so that if they ever go to a medical doctor or if they go to a psychiatrist, they're labeled as, right? And with that labeling, you can then discredit anything that this person is saying, anything that this person is researching, anything that this person is doing. So I'm not going to think much of it. I'm just suggesting that shit's weird. And I think it's funny that this YouTube, this podcast here with the Yahoo News, they focus on the issue from a primarily, how do I say this? Primarily in the Cuban aspect, because the Havana syndrome situation has never fully, like, you've never seen that issue fully develop anywhere else, because I would say after that whole incident in Cuba, any of the politicians that were targeted, quote unquote, were made to seem crazy and were probably made to step down. Kind of a funny conjecture here is Harvey Oswald, the same scientists that were in charge of some of these MK Ultra programs were the same scientists that then later labeled Harvey Oswald a crazy. So it goes to show you that these people kind of tend to use their same actors, use their same people, and use the status that they put themselves in, these positions of power, these positions of authorities, to then leverage over a citizen's life, which is kind of why I said that I have a status upgrade. I'm no longer just a normal citizen. I'm somebody who's actually trying to... It's not that I wanted to figure out the Nazi connection to the Nazi gold to the American financiers. Like, whoops. Like, you should have done a better job of hiding the fact that you used Solomon and Cromwell to create all these LLCs and then to funnel all these funds all over the world. And, you know, it's kind of why I highlighted a very interesting aspect of if Hitler went to Argentina. It's a very interesting thing, because the same family that was funneling all this money using his sons, well, he also died in Argentina. And, you know, I guess I make an enemy out of the Rockefellers, all of these foundations that actually put their money into it. Put their money into financing World War II from both sides, because it's more profitable that way. And keep in mind, it was the steel industry that largely benefited from this on both sides. You know, we can say that because look at what happened at the end of World War II. Europe was at the complete behest of the American Empire in order to rebuild themselves. And if we also pay attention from the aspect of Tartaria and the old war aspect, the old world aspect, a lot of beautiful buildings were destroyed during that time period too. So in order to rebuild all this, what is the main resource that is needed? Steel. Who had the largest steel manufacturing at the time while Europe was rebuilding themselves? Well, America. And, you know, I'm just highlighting very interesting points. I'm not suggesting anything else. I'm not going to So when I say that I'm a targeted individual, I'm saying that in tongue in cheek. I'm not really saying that seriously, because that's not what my research was focused on. My research was largely focused on identitarianism. Like, where did these identities come from? Who perpetuated these ideas in order to create this tribalistic sense amongst people? Because what I was more focused on was, how did we get here? Into a position where people have then chosen their identities far above everything else, and why have they become such useful idiots for politicians, the talking heads, the ideological battleground that we're currently seeing? And in me describing that, and me researching cybernetics, which led me to research MK Ultra, because it was all the same people funding this. Like, it's not that hard to figure out, but yet nobody ever really talks about the connection. And I guess I just made the mistake of naming Solomon and Cromwell, Allen Dulles, the Thyssen family, and how they largely use the same lawyer, right? Like, the same lawyer that was funneling this money was the same lawyer that did the investigation to figure out where the German money went. How does that make sense? Either way, my name is Ramirez, and hopefully you'll keep seeing more of me.